This week on Jersey Matters, a lawsuit with national ramifications in New Jersey. Parents are suing Governor Murphy in federal court to make certain their kids don't have to wear masks when they return to school. We'll talk with the attorney filing the case. Hundreds of medical needles are found washed up on North Jersey shores. The director of Clean Ocean Action explains why this keeps happening. Nursing homes in New Jersey going bankrupt? We'll talk with the head of the New Jersey Health Association. And in Princeton, a new police tool to de-escalate potentially deadly interactions. Hello and welcome to Jersey Matters. I'm Larry Menti. The governor is being sued by parents and students in New Jersey who want to make certain that masks aren't required at school when they return in September. Here's my interview with the constitutional attorney who filed the lawsuit, Bruce Afran. Sir, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's talk about the lawsuit that you just filed in federal court. Who are you suing and what does it allege?
Well, thank you, Larry. The lawsuit was filed in federal court in Newark. We are suing Governor Murphy, the Commissioner of Education, and the Commissioner of Health on behalf of 3 sets of parents and approximately a dozen high school students who are appearing in their own names. And the lawsuit is seeking to block any attempt to reimpose mask mandates and isolation and segregation of school children in New Jersey schools once school resumes again in September.
Why do you feel this suit is necessary, considering the fact that the governor lifted that mandate for September in schools? Do you not believe him?
Well, it's not that we don't believe him, but we do believe him. He said he's reserving the power to reimpose these rules in September. And he also authorized New Jersey school districts on their own to impose their own rules. And so we've already seen, according to one of our clients, Bordentown has already announced they're going to impose these rules in September. And the governor himself has said he's reserving the power to do it yet again. And he's now authorized all 500 plus school districts in New Jersey to issue their own mask and segregation orders. So we do believe the governor. The governor has said he's reserving the right to do it again, and he's telling school districts they can do it. And one of the problems, one of the problems we see is that the unions, which do wonderful work, are nevertheless pressing for these orders. And teachers who are fearful are demanding masking and segregation orders of children. And so the governor, we think, is responding to that largely because nowhere else in New Jersey are we seeing any effort to reimpose these orders, only in schools.
If you believe it is the teachers union that is behind this, why aren't they named in your lawsuit?
Well, the teachers union have the right to influence the governor if they wish. They're not the ones issuing these orders. It's the state that will be doing it. So it's the state that is the appropriate defendant. The governor has to respect the Constitution. Even if he has political reasons for giving into pressure, he still has to respect the Constitution and cannot impose these orders unilaterally on children.
How is this a constitutional issue?
Well, the First Amendment bluntly says there shall be no laws restricting speech or of what we call the right of freedom of association and privacy. And all of that is invoked by these orders. Children's faces are covered, teachers' faces are covered. People can no longer read the non-facial cues that are so much a part of communication. Friendships can't develop, associations can't develop when children can't see each other's faces, when you can't see whether someone's smiling or frowning at you, when you can't even tell how a teacher is reacting to you. All of this violates the right of association that the First Amendment protects. It also violates the right of privacy of the child. The child has privacy rights in their own body, in their own existence. To be forced to be masked 8 hours a day, to stay 6 feet away from every other person in school, to be kept within plastic barriers around their desk, which is what has happened in New Jersey universally. All of this violates the basic right of privacy of the child. And children have those same rights as adults.
That sounds like a legal argument. Is that the same argument that the students and the teachers are making? Or did you turn it into that argument?
Well, that's an interesting question. The lawyer's job is to bring the issue to court in a way a court can work with. I doubt many of the high school students articulated it quite the way I did, but they're troubled by this because it affects their lives. And when someone's life is impaired by government orders, we look to the Constitution as the tool to fight that.
But for them, it's not a freedom of speech issue. For them, they don't want to wear masks in class because they think it's a hindrance.
Well, they think it's a hindrance. It interferes with their education. It's a physical burden. It actually prevents them from relating to other school children, to their friends, to develop friendships. It prevents them even from relating to teachers. But it is also a speech issue in the sense that so much speech is nonverbal. Facial communications, frowns, smiles, and a large part of speech is totally lost because of these orders. And also the idea of being forcibly separated 6 feet from every other kid translates into isolation even in the lunchroom. Children are forced to sit on one side of a table, 2 people at a table. The normal groups that form among children in school at lunchtime are no longer permitted. There's no longer communication in the halls between classes. Children are really isolated now in their classrooms, wearing masks behind glass 8 hours a day.
Are there similar lawsuits across the country?
I think, frankly, Larry, I haven't studied that in detail, but I believe one lawsuit recently was filed, but frankly, I don't remember what state. It doesn't affect my judgment as a lawyer because what's happening in New Jersey is clearly against the Constitution. I think, frankly, New Jersey's rules are probably among the most stringent in the country. And it's probably not happening in too many other places.
I ask you the question because you filed in federal court, and if others have filed in federal court, as they make their way up to federal court, you know where this could possibly end up. It could end up in the Supreme Court, depending on how the rulings go. Are you willing to keep appealing it to that point?
Oh, of course. I mean, we expect that it's going to be resolved at some appeal level. This is very, excuse me, this is very similar actually to the religion cases in Brooklyn, in which the New York governor, Governor Cuomo, ordered limits of 10 people per house of worship. And the US Supreme Court intervened and said, well, this is blatantly discriminatory. It affects the religious only. All businesses and other gathering places aren't subject to these rules, but only houses of worship. So it's very similar because only children are subject to these rules. School children are the only group that is still subject to these rules. And despite the fact that hundreds of people can gather in a restaurant, in a catering hall, at a wedding, at a bar mitzvah, at a basketball stadium, thousands can gather sitting on top of each other. Nowhere does the governor require these restrictions, and only as to school children is this still an issue. This is a blatant form of discrimination, very similar to what happened in the religious context in New York.
It's a fascinating argument because I believe when they wrote into laws, you can't discriminate because of age, they weren't thinking that end of the age spectrum. They were thinking the older age of the age spectrum, but they didn't differentiate. So it is possibly discrimination because of age. Does the CDC guidelines, does that affect you at all? The fact that they're saying that school children should wear masks if they're unvaccinated when they go back in September?
Actually, Larry, the CDC guidelines are not law. They're not even regulations. They're simply, essentially, a kind of press recommendation by CDC. They are not law. They do not affect any rights of anyone anywhere in the country. New Jersey can only issue rules if we follow our own lawmaking process. There have to be hearings in New Jersey. The Commissioner of Education has to hold hearings. Expert testimony has to be presented. People have to be able to cross-examine and to appear at these hearings. And only then can an agency issue any orders. CDC's guidelines have no legal effect. Also, I have to point out, CDC has not issued expert reports. It's not issued studies showing the need for these rules. It's issued what really are just long and kind of glorified press releases. There's absolutely no science offered by CDC to support the guidelines. They haven't issued studies. They haven't issued panel hearings. There's been absolutely none of that. So none of it can really be law.
So what is the next step for you?
Well, the next step is we're going to serve the New Jersey Attorney General with this case. That'll happen probably tomorrow or Friday. We're then going to ask the court to set some sort of expedited briefing schedule. Possibly we may seek an injunction to block this from going forward in September, if we need to, unless the court's able to set a briefing schedule earlier. But we're going to move forward with this probably by mid-August. I'm sure briefs will be filed in this case.
Well, good luck to you, Sarah, and we'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Larry.
Bruce Afran, constitutional attorney. Still to come on Jersey Matters, a lead environmentalist in New Jersey is concerned about how many wind turbines they're planning for the Jersey Shore. We'll talk to her next.